Bill. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the July 18th meeting of the Arapahoe County Planning Commission. We are live and being recorded. We will start this evening. Actually, we do have a quorum present. All commissioners are here except Mr. Brummel for the record. So 6 commissioners are here. We will start with case Z17-005, Saddle Rock Highlands Preliminary Development Plan, 4th Amendment.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair. On this particular case, we do have jurisdiction mostly. The affidavit of mailing apparently wasn't notarized as it needs to be. I think it's appropriate. It's okay to proceed with this, but we will need the completed affidavit for the record prior to Board of County Commissioners hearing on this. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Molly Urquild-Larson, Senior Planner with the Public Works Department. What's before you this evening is a request to amend the Saddle Rock Highlands Preliminary Development Plan. The applicant is Resolute Investments Incorporated. The subject property is located within the Tallgrass Commercial Center, which is situated at the northwest corner of East Quincy Avenue and South Piccadilly Road. This amendment proposes to allow an increase of the floor area ratio from 0.65 to 1.25 and would apply only to Lot 3 of this development. The applicant is proposing this amendment so that a 79,500 square foot self-storage facility can be built on Lot 3. The applicant is also wanting to add architectural metal panels as a building material as part of this amendment. If this application is approved, the applicant will have to go through a specific development plan and also an administrative site plan review process, so you will probably see it again for your review and comment. The applicant did meet with the Saddle Rock Tallgrass Homeowners Association last year to review the proposed self-storage building. No opposition was voiced at this meeting. Since the Homeowners Association meeting, he was contacted. There was some email going back and forth with some of the representatives from the Homeowners Association in regards to the floor area ratio, and it appears that he resolved the questions or answered the questions sufficiently. Based on the findings of the staff report, staff is recommending approval with conditions. And this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions for me at this time, otherwise I'll turn it over to Chris Barnes. Any questions? No? Okay, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Chris, if you can state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Chris Barnes, 7374 South Alton Way, Unit 203, Centennial, Colorado 80112. As I said, I'm Chris Barnes. I'm Vice President of Real Estate for Resolute Investments, and I'm here to present the Tallgrass self-storage. I just want to thank Molly and the Planning Commission for being here tonight and processing this request and listening to my request. Having not processed in Arapahoe County, I'd just like to introduce my company to you guys. We're a local developer. We develop a range of product from medical, industrial, office, hotels, self-storage. And we're a long-term holder, and what makes that unique is we're not building cheaply to sell immediately once we fill it up. We build sustainably, so it's there for a long time and good to the environment. We work with the community to make it architecturally pleasing, and we make sure that everybody in our neighborhood has my phone number, so if there's a problem, they can call me. I'm not just getting in to get out. We're a values-based corporation. You can see our values there. We make all of our decisions with those values in mind. Our purpose is to influence the real estate built environment for generations to come by creating places that enhance the human experience. And we care. I've met with the Tallgrass HOA. I met with the neighbor to the east who owns the school there. Mr. Miller, who owns the property to the south of us, is the seller of the property. So I've tried to cover my bases in presenting this to people before I came to this board. So our request, as Molly stated, is to increase the FAR, which is the floor area ratio, as you know, for our self-storage facility or for this site. The existing FAR is 0.65, which would allow a max building of 31,623 square feet. Our proposed FAR of 1.25 would push that to 60,815 square feet, and I'll go into a little bit of that further later. And we're also proposing architectural metal panels as an allowed material, and I'll show you an example of that used in a picture on a facility here in a couple slides. I think it's important to not only talk about what we're changing, but what we're going to adhere to. The use is already allowed. We're going to meet all the setbacks. Maximum building height, we're going to be well under that. We're going to meet all the open space and all other requirements of the existing PDP. So why do I need the increase? So the 0.65 FAR does not allow the size of facility that is economically viable. You need to have a 60,000 net rentable facility to make it economically viable. Staff it, pay the taxes, pay the utilities, everything else. So 60,000 net rentable equates to about an 80,000 square foot facility because you have common corridors, offices, things of that nature that reduce your square footage. So what we would be proposing to deliver on this site is about 80,000 square feet with a basement that's below grade that doesn't count against the FAR, and most likely 2 stories, but potentially 3 stories above grade. This facility will only have one set of loading doors, no drive-up doors, and it will architecturally blend with the existing structure. So what does that look like on this site? We laid it out. This is the facility if you're a driver of a truck. So just to orient you, out here is Piccadilly. Down here is Quincy. There's a retail building here, Walmart over here. And this is Oxford. So a driver would come in, round that corner around here, back up into our loading dock, which faces south away from the residential, unload all of their materials onto a cart, push it into the facility to their specific unit, and unload there. So only one location of loading doors, and it faces the back side of the retail development here. You can see that there's a utility corridor here where we have a lot of utilities. There's currently trees along that frontage, so we didn't have a lot of trees there, but we plan to put some more if we can fit it into those utilities. And then we landscape the rest of it per the requirements. Architecturally speaking, this is a facility that we just delivered in Littleton, Colorado in 2016. The reds, the whites, and the blues are the architectural metal panel that I'm asking to use. You can see we blended it naturally with CMU block. And it looks more of like a retail or an office complex than a self-storage facility. And that long-term hold, we want to drive up something that we're really proud of. This, we can do that. You can see the one storage dock over in this area. So just to give you some context, this is what's south of the facility. It's a retail building owned by Mr. Miller. It's 29.5 feet high. Walmart just to the west, 28 to 32 feet high, depending on the parapet. Our goal would be to just be higher than this so that people could see our parapet from Quincy, so they can know that there's a self-storage facility there. So we would want to eclipse that just slightly. And you can see to the east, there's a single story with a pitched roof, so that's about 20 feet. And then this is the residential behind it, which is between 20 and I'd say 30 feet. So architecturally, we'll blend, and it won't stick out like a sore thumb. So why self-storage? Currently in this 3-mile supply, there's 2.7 square feet per person. The national average is 7. So there's a high demand for self-storage in this market, and it's just because of how fast everything is growing out there. There's low traffic impact, the 2013 Almanac, which is the latest one to put out parking numbers. That's why I used that. Said 27 vehicles per day for a facility of this size. Typical retail of 10,000 square feet, you're talking 400 to 1,500 trips a day. So a lot of people like it because it reduces the traffic. Minimal light impact, low sound impact, no traffic. All of that loading faces away from the homes, and we're 100 feet from the nearest home. And I think some of the additional benefits are we're utilizing the land properly. Rather than a typical self-storage facility, which takes 4 to 6 acres, we're doing it in 1.12. and you don't have any of the drive-up doors.
Is that your staff having fun?
It is. And so with that, that's the reason for the request for the increase in PDP, and I'll just open it up to questions from there.
Questions?
The landscaping around, would the HOA be responsible for any of that? There was a comment about that in the packet.
I don't know if the HOA is responsible for the frontage, Rick.
The shopping center manages and maintains the landscaping along the street to the up to the sidewalk. And then on the inside of the sidewalk, that will be maintained by the owner of the property.
Pardon, could you identify yourself for the?
Sorry about
I'm
that.
Rick Miller.
Need to get you in the mic.
I'm Rick Miller, 4725 South Monaco Street, Denver, Suite 330. And I'm the developer of the Tallgrass Commercial Center, and I'm the seller of the property to Resolute. So to answer the question, the common area is maintained. The landscaping between the street and the sidewalk is maintained as part of the shopping center. Anything on the inside of the sidewalk will be maintained by Resolute, by Mr. Barnes' company.
Okay.
Thanks, Rick. So I think in this picture, that's maintained by the shopping center as a whole, and then everything in from that would be us.
I have a question. Let's go. You said maybe 2 stories, maybe 3 stories. How high is that building going to be?
The goal on a 2-story, usually like I said, I want to eclipse Rick's building with my parapet, so probably in the 30 to 35 range.
On a 2-story?
That on a 3-story, we could probably get 35 range.
So this parapet,
that could push to 40.
this parapet wasn't just stick up there with a sign on top of it?
Yeah, it's part of the roofing elements. So it will blend in. I'm not going to try to stick something up that looks bad architecturally for the neighborhood, but I will try to get higher than Rick's building.
So the roof line, parapet, roof line.
The parapet will surround the entire building. So typically the parapet could be 1 or 2 feet. In some places it'll be 5 or 6 feet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you intending to have this building be similar or identical to the one that you showed us in Littleton?
Yeah, there's different architectural requirements in this PDP, but that's the type of product that we would try to deliver here. Metal panels, CMU block, yes.
It says in here that in North Quincy Highlands there's supposed to be a mountain rustic theme.
Sure.
For Colorado contemporary, and my impression of Tallgrass, the architecture within the neighborhood is pretty traditional.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if it would be a fit to have something so contemporary.
Sure. Well, what we try to do is blend in with the neighborhood. That's not an exact example. What I was just trying to represent is architecture as a whole. We like to make something really nice. We would use the colors that blend in with the current colors of the community, and try. We do like a little bit of color. We think that's nice, so we would try, but ultimately everything has to be approved by the HOA within that community. So Rick and the fellow board will decide whether or not it fits or doesn't fit architecturally.
So the metal panels give you the color? Is that why you want them? And what would you choose if you couldn't have the metal panels?
The metal panels can give you color, but you can get those in the browns or more muted colors like we had in the kind of the tan and white in that facility, like this. So this white part is also metal panel. So, or you can, I think this CMU block is really kind of blends with what's there already, but we would like to do some metal panel if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
What is the advantage of the metal panels? Because I can't say we've typically seen them.
Sure. Architecturally, it just provides some uniqueness to the facility. You can get metal panels that provide a stucco effect. They last a really long time. They wear very well. and basically they allow you to put a lot of this blend, this CMU block. This is really expensive. This is kind of more moderate, so it blends that price.
Are those metal panels noisy?
No.
Not even with hail?
No. I mean, I haven't put up a noise monitor to it, so I don't know if I can answer that question really effectively, but we haven't had a problem with it.
So what is the maximum height you're looking at for this building?
Well, allowed per the PDP is 50 feet. I would be well under that. My goal would be 1 basement and 2 stories above it. So to get over Rick's building, I'd probably have to be in the 35 feet range.
I'm okay with 35 feet.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, we will move to the public hearing.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone from the public who would like to address the Planning Commission on this issue tonight? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Molly, do you have any further comments?
No, I do not.
Okay, so now back to us.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Okay. In the case of Z17-005, Saddle Rock Highlands Preliminary Development Plan Amendment, Planning Commissioners have read the staff report and received testimony at the public hearing and find ourselves in agreement with staff findings 1 through 4, including all plans and attachments as set forth in the staff report, and recommend approval of this application subject to the following conditions. Number 1, prior to signature of the final Mylar copy of the Preliminary Development Plan Amendment, the applicant agrees to address the Planning Division, Mapping Division, Zoning Division, and Engineering Services Division comments and concerns as outlined in their reports. Number 2, the development of Lot 3 shall comply with the required development standards as specified in the Preliminary Development Plan and Land Development Code.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Saul seconds. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I have trouble with allowing metal panels specifically.
Now, I know we've seen it more in contemporary, for example, in Boulevard 1 where we build. They can be a nice alternative. They are very durable. Some are insulated. So, it's not really just a piece of metal. A lot of them also have really good rain screen behind them for moisture. So I think architecturally they're a good building product and more commercially used.
They're not like corrugated. No,
it's not something you can buy at Home Depot to put on your shed or something. It's pretty industrial, nice looking stuff.
So it wouldn't stand out on a building?
I don't think so. I think, we use products that look like cedar, that are concrete, fiber, cement siding. And, it's nicer than a lot of the residential product. It's very durable, low maintenance. So I think from a sustainability perspective, it's probably a very good choice.
Because I was going to ask, how will it look in 25 years?
Probably very good.
Because that's the key, not how it looks in a year, but how does it look in a
So the
long
colors put in the metal?
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's pretty standard for commercial. And then Dove Valley, we've proved quite a few with.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is there any other buildings there that have metal? I don't believe
There's a man that knows.
Mr. Miller, do you want to ask him?
I was going to say the Walmart sign, Brian.
Yeah.
None of the other buildings have any metal panels. So when Chris and I started negotiating the deal, I was also fairly resistant to having metal panels. And I think the blue kind of threw us off. However, I did go out and take a look specifically at this facility, and I was pleasantly surprised at how good the panels themselves looked. The color, we'll get to that, but I think that the building will adhere and blend in and be architecturally sympathetic with the balance of the shopping center. That will be our goal as the Architectural Control Committee.
Right, because you have architectural control.
I am the Architectural Control Committee, so we're going to have long discussions about the colors.
So maybe not so much blue.
Yeah, we're going to do the blue.
We'll work that out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, any other questions?
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We are going to take a short break so we can prepare for the next case.
Yeah.
Good solution. It can be better for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good job.
That's why I think I'm okay with 35. I mean, the Walmart.
You mean?
Yeah. 50, right. Well, it would really jump at 50. It would look odd. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Willingly or willing?
That was my point, but I would. Oh.
Maybe it won't. I don't know. Will we see it? No. I got it. Yeah. I mean, the new process is supposed to. Maybe we see it in the commission. Don't. Oh, okay. Right, we're trying to save some stuff. We probably would, and they probably won't. Yes. Because I don't know if I'm ready for doing that. I thought you were out the door. Okay, we're going to reopening the hearing, and we have a ghost from the past for Arapahoe County, Mr. Fair here to present for the county on case U17-001, Bennett Solar Use by Special Review 1041 permit requirements.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. The applicant has met all public notice requirements, thereby establishing jurisdiction. The applicant, Bennett Solar LLC, and property owner Van K LLC are requesting approval of a use by special review for a solar power plant. The solar power plant will be approximately 10 megawatts on approximately 80 acres located east of the corner of Brick Center Road, or County Road 129, and County Road 6. I passed out a number of, and the applicant passed out a number of different materials. I specifically want to draw your attention to the referral comment that came in after we sent out the package to you from the town of Bennett, who had no comments. Staff is recommending approval of this use by special review with 6 conditions of approval based on the findings contained in the staff report. Are there any questions?
Do we have this Bennett referral comment?
Yes.
Yes. Is it just from Bennett?
Oh, okay.
It's hard to read.
Got it.
But that is the one. So are there any initial questions? Okay. Then I'll introduce Michelle Zimmerman, the applicant's representative.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Michelle Zimmerman, 325 North French Street, Breckenridge, Colorado, 80424. I'm a senior project manager with Cypress Creek Renewables, and our project, Bennett Solar LLC, is, as Sherman said, and thank you, Sherman, for working this case and being our case planner on this. Thanks so much for hearing our case today. So our project, as I mentioned, I'll get a little further into the details of the Bennett Solar project itself. But first, because this is our first project before Arapahoe County, I wanted to spend some time talking about the technical aspects of it, the engineering overview, and Cypress Creek Renewables as a company itself. So I'm going to introduce Jeff Weber. He's our project engineer, and let him go through the kind of overview part of things first, and then we'll talk specifically about the Bennett Solar project.
And I'm going to ask one question.
You bet.
You may be part of your presentation. We've seen a lot of 2 megawatt. Could you, if you're not planning to, could you address the difference in this and those?
Sure, and I will be addressing that. It's obviously a size. So a 2 megawatt size, you're looking at, 5-8 acres, somewhere around there. We're talking about a 10 megawatt AC, and we're talking about closer to 70 acres. So if you think of, an 80 acre area of land, it's about that size. So it's a different thing to think about conceptually. But yeah, we'll be talking specifically about that. And I know a lot of the projects that you've looked at have been community solar, which we also have done some of that, and I've done quite a bit of community solar projects myself in the past. And in that situation, your customers are your ratepayers. I can be a customer, you guys can be a customer. And in this situation, IRE, Intermountain Rural Electric Authority, is the customer. So, and I do have more specifics about that later in the presentation. Great. Well, I'll introduce Jeff Weber, our project engineer, and I'll be back.
Hi, my name is Jeff Weber. Address is 2919 Magnolia Street, Oakland, California, 94608. Before I dive into the details of Cypress Creek and some of the details around solar technology in general, quick background about myself. I'm one of the project engineers at Cypress Creek Renewables. I've been with the company a couple of years now. Been in solar for about 5 years. And my focus has been mainly on the system performance, which is a lot of estimating energy production and a number of other ways that we like to think about the operation and performance of these systems. I have a degree in physics, and a lot of that comes into play in understanding the actual sunlight to electricity process of the way these power plants work. So, quick overview of Cypress Creek Renewables. We were founded in 2014. Company's based out of Santa Monica, California. But most of our projects are spread around the United States. We have a large development footprint in the Carolinas, both north and south, Oregon, Texas, New York, and most recently we've started to pursue project opportunities in places like Colorado and Michigan and Montana and a number of other states. But the strategy is the same. The company's guiding mantra is to install as much local solar as possible. And what this means is we see a happy medium of these sort of 2 to 10 megawatt size facilities that you can develop within sort of the natural environment and flow of communities, both big and small. And this affords us the advantage of we have the efficiencies of ground mount systems. With residential rooftop, you have to pay people to climb on top of roofs, and it's dangerous, and every system is unique, and you need to develop tens of thousands of them to actually make any sense. Whereas the opposite of these gigantic facilities that we think of that are developed out in the desert, you have to build big high voltage transmission lines or, long, expensive extension cords to hook them up to existing grid infrastructure and other communities. Most of our projects fall in the much smaller range where we can tie into existing what we call medium voltage distribution grid. It requires a lot less equipment, but you still get the economies of scale that ground mount solar offers. So it offers a great way to seamlessly integrate into communities without the high cost. Our pipeline currently, just to give some concept, we currently have an operating portfolio of about 1 gigawatt. Our pipeline in terms of we have actual land control across the United States, we're looking at about 5 gigawatts we expect to have operational in the next 2 or 3 years by the end of 2020. So we're going to be very busy. The map here kind of just gives you a showcase visually of where we're really active right now. And as you can see, we have a lot more in development than we have in operation, but that's the plan, is to eventually bring all those projects online. So I've often, solar is not really a new technology, at least in this format. It's pretty familiar in a lot of areas. I find it really helpful to go through some of the basics and just sort of, educate audiences on the very specific fundamentals of what we're actually building here. Solar, it has a lot of misconceptions about it because there's a lot of different solar technologies. We're very specific in one technology, and just want to make sure everybody's very clear exactly what we're developing. And it's not a matter of us being very particular or choosy about one. We like to consider ourselves technology agnostic. However, we also look for what makes the most sense, and right now it's this technology that we're presenting here. But the big picture is that there was kind of a first wave of solar development that occurred in the early to mid 2000s and kind of finishing up around 2010. And much of these types of projects were what we consider demonstration projects or proof of concept. We'd never seen large utility scale solar farms built before. These needed a lot of support by subsidies and other incentives because there was no infrastructure that had been built. It's hard to get an industry up and running. 2010 was a very important year. The price of solar photovoltaics started dropping dramatically. In the last 5 years, it's dropped 62%, and it's continuing to drop at a rate of about 5 to 10% per year. It's going to start to level off. There's only so low that the actual cost of these systems can be, but we find ourselves with an environment now where there's less of a need to be propped up by incentives or any sort of above market rates to make the economics of these projects work. They stand on their own two legs, which is why you're seeing quite an explosion in the volume of these projects year over year. If you have any questions, please do interrupt. I'm here for you guys.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So you talked about subsidies?
Yes.
What's the subsidy? Per panel, per unit?
The current subsidy is under the federal investment tax credit, which was originally passed by George W. Bush in 2006 as part of a stimulus incentive. It was then extended right before his term in office ended, and then extended again as part of a post-recession stimulus bill. So numbers-wise, it's 30% of the fair market value of the facility, which is wrapped up in the cost of the equipment. Interesting mechanism. As the cost of the equipment comes down, so do the incentives. It's kind of an interesting part. Another interesting thing about the tax credit is that it requires investors to actually own the equipment. The concept is sort of a skin in the game technique where you don't want people to claim the tax credits, flip the project, and hightail it off to the next one. So you actually have to own the project for, I think it's 5 years in order to claim those tax credits. So it creates long-term ownership and incentives to make sure these things work and live up to their expectations.
Where are the solar panels manufactured?
Most of the world's solar panels are manufactured in East Asia or Southeast Asia, China, Taiwan, some manufacturing in Indonesia. Germany has quite a few solar manufacturing plants. There's some in Japan. And then there is a growing manufacturing in the U.S., but it's by no means the majority.
Where do you get yours?
We get most of ours from China. We are sourcing going into late 2017, 2018. We'll be sourcing approximately 30% of our panels from domestic U.S. manufacturers. And really the reason for that is a price and economics decision. So conceptually, the technology that we use is photovoltaics, okay, solar PV for short. I'll be using that kind of going forward just because it's easier to say. It's a long word. Technology-wise and what's really happening, it's actually a fairly complex physical phenomenon, but the engineering is really simple. Sunlight in, electricity out. No, or very few, if no, moving parts in an entire facility. The antithesis to this is solar thermal. Now, solar thermal is a pretty old technology. It's as old as hanging your clothing out in the sunshine to dry. As far as engineering a utility-scale power plant, it's a lot more complicated. You have to focus light, which requires a bunch of moving parts. You have a heat transfer medium. You've got to have pressure regulator. It's a big mess, and there's a good reason why this technology has fallen out of favor. It's far too complicated, difficult to scale, and against a much simpler modular product like solar photovoltaics, it just can't compete.
So do these panels, you said there's like no movement. Do these not?
Little or no. This particular project is a tracking project, and it moves in one, we call it single axis. They lay flat and they rotate east-west. Yeah.
Follow the day.
That's correct. Yeah, and that leads to this next slide kind of showing the two different designs. Most of our projects currently are fixed tilt. That has more to do with the regions in which we have been developing. Single axis tracking, you need a little bit more land, but you also need to have certain qualities of the sunlight. If you have a lot of cloudy days, single axis tracking doesn't do you a lot more good in terms of energy production versus fixed tilt. So you're spending more for the tracking mechanism, but you're getting less energy out. So there is a break-even point. Colorado, most of the American West, Texas, kind of basically anywhere west of the Mississippi and not right up against the West Coast, you're looking at single-axis tracking is going to be the most common. If you've ever been out to the Denver airport, you've seen a system that's almost identical to what we're proposing. So in terms of safety risks, all our projects have to follow best industry practices with civil, structural, electrical engineering. All systems are approved by local jurisdictional authorities for building and electrical permits to meet code. Everything's National Electric Code compliant. There's actually a new edition coming out this year. So all our projects are fully engineered by licensed engineers and follow best practices when it comes to safety. For all power plants, we have to keep people from getting into them. So there's perimeter fencing that goes up, once again, follows code for these types of power plants. And then we do regular vegetation maintenance, mainly to keep the shading from hitting the panels too much. We are looking at, and there's actually kind of a very, this is where like the inner hippie comes out in me, but there's a great growth in ecology blending with solar power plants. We will reseed with blends that promote both pollinators and short growth, where you don't have like meter-tall weeds growing, and also encourages a very active ecosystem. We'll be employing crystalline silicon. This is the most common technology. 90% of the panels produced worldwide are this technology. Sand and aluminum is most of what's composed of. A little bit of silver, a little bit of copper. But 99% of the module is composed of silicon and aluminum. Yeah. And so as far as when I say beach sand, that's an exaggeration. You'd need something a lot more pure than that. So high quality quartz. There's some silicon mines. Factories refine it down. They grow crystals. They cut the crystals into wafers, very thin wafers. And then when they come out of that process, they're actually quite reflective. So they do surface etching treatments to give them their, they end up taking on this blue color, but really it's designed to enhance how much light the wafers absorb. So those cells then are placed onto a backsheet. It's encapsulated by tempered glass and encapsulated by an aluminum frame to hold it all together. The glass can take a golf ball going 100 miles an hour. It's actually the standard test. I've been to the torture chambers where they put all the modules through and they shake them and they put them through humid and salty environments and all manner of nasty conditions.
In Colorado hail.
Yes, Colorado hail. So golf ball going 100 miles an hour. They're ready for it. Yeah. So in terms of impact on the surrounding community, there is some amount of light that does reflect off the panels. Now, it sounds a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's actually the point is to absorb as much light as possible. And every year they make more improvements, and it's all part of like a sort of a multiple parallel efforts of increasing the efficiencies of the technology. But for the most part, you're looking at a small amount of light that does get reflected. So it's a matter of where does the light get reflected then. This infographic is more appropriate for a fixed tilt system, but the general concept is the same for single axis tracking. Throughout the day, the panels are following the sun as it arcs through the sky. So the light's all going to be, what little light is reflected is going to go straight back up towards the sky. There is a maximum rotation range, so at some point, usually between 45 and 50 degrees to the east and west, they stop. At that point, the light is then coming in as the sun continues to set. It fires off towards the sky. So from a ground observer's perspective, or even someone whose house may or may not be, if somebody builds a tower next to the array, it's extremely difficult to actually physically put yourself in a position where you'll be seeing any amount of light reflecting off the panels. And if that were to happen, it wouldn't happen for very long because of their gradual movement throughout the day. In terms of safety for aviators, no better example than the solar power plant built right by the airport. But wherever our projects are, they have to be FAA glare hazard compliant. And to date, no single solar PV facility like the one that we've developed has ever come up as been the source of a perceived glare hazard. Now, just to also put in context why I'm focusing on a few of these are generally the most common concerns that are brought up. And it's not a matter of them being like silly or like, non-applicable. They are very valid concerns for something new, and I just want to make sure there's no misconceptions. So, sound. I mentioned before, no moving parts. I added the asterisks here right before we jumped into the meeting because this is a tracking project. It's not very exciting. It moves very slowly throughout the day. The only source of noise on the power plant is going to come from the inverters. The inverters, they sit on a concrete pad, and we usually put the inverter next to the transformer. And what this equipment does is the panels generate low voltage DC electricity, direct current electricity, but in order to tie into the grid, we need to match the medium or high voltage, and we also need to have alternating current or AC current. That's what the inverter and the transformers do. So in the DC to AC conversion, some amount of noise is made, and if you're standing right next to the inverter during the middle of the day, that's when it's going to be loudest for anyone who's nearby. But in terms of the actual amount of sound that's made, if you're more than 150 feet away from the inverter, it starts to blend into the background noise. So when it comes to the site location of these, we end up going for almost a 500-foot range just because we can, and there's no reason not to. And we'll situate this inverter pad right in the middle of the array where it's buffered against anybody being able to hear it who's standing even right next to the solar array. It's also worthwhile to note that when it comes to the placement of the inverter pad or any sort of special equipment, there's really no preference on our part. It's all the same in terms of the functioning of the facility and the engineering goes. So our perspective is why not do as much as we can to be favorable to the community. In addition to that, sometimes there's concern of electromagnetic fields that are raised. And a lot of this is just a misconception about what they are. Everything in nature produces electromagnetic fields. I'm producing one right now. The microphone equipment is. That water bottle is emitting a very small one. And so do these power plants. The stronger the current that you're pushing through your facility, the stronger the electromagnetic field. So you go to the place where the current is the strongest. It's right by the inverters. And they produce the strongest electromagnetic field. However, once again, at 150 feet, you're looking at EMF levels that are indistinguishable from the Earth's natural magnetic field. So you can't even measure it above background radiation. For additional context, I'm not sure the federal agency, but they have listed maximum exposures to EMFs in the environment. And the strongest EMF signal that can come out of the inverters is still several orders of magnitude less than what you get from your overhead wooden pole power lines that run up and down everybody's streets. And so that's kind of it for the main topics of the technology. There's a lot of concern about the economics of solar because it's been drilled in everybody's head for years that renewables are expensive and they don't make any economic sense. And the reality is in the last couple of years, that's no longer true, and it's starting to make more economic sense than anything else. So how do we know how well this solar farm is going to operate, and how do we make that decision? Is this a good economic decision to build this? Cypress Creek, we develop a lot of solar projects, and we decide to, for lack of a better term, kill a lot of projects because they don't make economic sense. So one site is more favorable over the other due to a number of different reasons, and we start with an energy production estimate. So we have good weather records. There's ground measurement stations, and there's satellites that have been up for about 20 years. So this gives us a good profile of the expected amount of energy that we get per year, solar energy we can get per year, and how much it varies, which is important. That goes into our energy model, which is our detailed simulation. We can put in the geometry of the array, the specific technology, place it in the location, and then simulate energy production throughout the year. So then we have an estimate of energy production, which we can then tie with a power purchase agreement with the utility, and that gives us a good idea of our revenue throughout the year. And so long as the net present value of project revenue over the lifetime of your contract with the utility, which is where all the value actually sits when you think about it, as long as that works within the construction, development, operations costs, we've got a good economic project. And that's how the whole industry works. And then lastly, just to talk about the useful life of the project, because this is something else that comes up a lot, curiosity, how long do these panels last? So currently, we're not sure. The original solar modules that were sort of the prototypes of what we see now, I took a picture. This was built in Davis, California. There's a testing site there. It's kind of like the solar equivalent where like the fish crawled out of the sea and like grew legs. It's kind of a cool place to go see all the different failed experiments. But the first solar module is actually still working. It's not working great, but it's still working. It's about 60 years old. So there's really no expected lifetime of the panels. They use a little bit of efficiency each year, which we wrap into our full financial model. The inverters, they have parts that will fail kind of around the 15 to 25 year mark, but it's all modular. It's the same idea. You can swap out the parts that are broken. And then the transformers are the sealed units, and they're coils that just transfer or step up the voltage, and there's not a lot of moving parts in that component, so they tend not to fail very often. What generally dictates the lifetime of the solar array is the racking. It's typically made of galvanized, some type of galvanized steel. It will eventually rust. And so that's what limits our projections, which is sometime in the 35 to 45 year mark for most projects. So at the end of a project's life, you can recycle all of the PV material. It's really valuable. There's a lot of high value to the PV panels themselves. You can recycle as much of the steel as you can, and there's a pretty large sum that comes along with that usually covers all the costs of removing the equipment at the end. It is worth noting that the way the racks are mounted into the earth, they're driven steel piles, much like fence posts. They come right out the same way they went in. They don't leave anything behind. And then just a couple visuals. These are fixed tilt systems, but it's a similar concept. And we actually have a picture of what we expect Bennett Solar Farm to look like, so you can see the slight difference between the trackers and the fixed tilt. But just wanted to show kind of with human figures in there what it tends to look like. And then you can see it doesn't take long for vegetation to start to come back after the construction's done. The objects on the left, that's the inverter and transformer that you're looking at. All right, I hope you enjoyed an exercise in information overload. Happy to answer any questions that come up or you think of, and thank you for your time.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Curiosity, what is the largest solar facility produced? The largest one in the United States?
That's a great question. So there's two things that are... Yeah, there's. I'll give you a rough number, but there's two things that way we think about the different solar facilities is there's something called yield, which is the amount of energy per DC power capacity installed, or more how much energy for how many solar panels you put on a farm. And as an example, in North Carolina, where we build most of our projects, it's about 1,500 megawatt hours per megawatt DC that you install. And you can take identical solar farms, say you have a 1 megawatt solar farm in North Carolina, and then you put that same farm in Colorado, same design, same capacity. The one in Colorado will produce a little more energy because the sunlight's a little better. So you might see like 1,600. So that's the way we think about it. So you can scale that up. I think the largest farm in the United States is in California. I think it's 500 megawatts. And I know it's a tracker, and I know that trackers in California are around 1,800 megawatt hours per megawatt DC. So it would be 1,800 times 500, which is a lot of energy. Yeah. This facility's 14 megawatts DC and single axis tracking, so it'd be about 1,750, 1,700 approximately. So you'd have to do the math, and you can kind of estimate on an annual basis what that would look like. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, that was a lot of information. Great that Jeff could be here to give us a little bit of the overview. And yeah, I was just thinking, I think it's in Tehachapi, the 500 megawatt. Mm-hmm. I think it's Middle America or something like that. Warren Buffett project. Anyway, but yeah, I think it's a pretty big one. So to talk specifically about this project, the Bennett Solar project. So this is just a vicinity map. Sherman told us it was on the corner. It's a little northeast of the intersection of Brick Center, which is County Road 129, and East Mitchell, which is County Road 6, East 6. And it's not right on that northwest corner. It's in about, it's about an 80-acre parcel rectangle, so it's in a ways. And we do have a site address for this area. It's 46465 East County Road 6, so that's great. Thank you to staff for getting that together. The property owners are here. Mr. and Mr. Van Dyke are here. So thank you for being here if you have any questions of them. Project owner is Bennett Solar, LLC. And as I mentioned earlier, the acreage is about 71.5. So, if you can imagine thinking it's easier to think about acres than it is to think about megawatts. So, our maximum height is 12 feet. And while we don't expect the trackers to go all the way up to 12 feet, we do a maximum height of that simply for topography. So if you've got not a ditch, but if you've got a low area or a higher area, we're not going to exceed that 12 foot. And if we were going to, we would need to do some kind of grading or site prep, something like that. We mentioned it's going to be a tracking system. Our fence is 8-foot tall chain link. And the reason we did that was National Electric Code does require a 7-foot fence. And when we spoke with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they said 8 foot is what we need for, of course, an area deer, pronghorn. It's going to be bad if a fawn if a doe and a fawn get separated, which I don't see that happening. But certainly with 8 foot, let's hope it doesn't. And we, of course, elected to forego any of the wire on top because nobody wants to see that. We've all seen horrible pictures of that. So the power output, as we talked about, or as Jeff talked about, because this is a single axis tracker, we're going to be getting a higher yield. So upwards of 1,700, maybe even 1,800 kilowatt hours per kilowatt DC. This is, as Jeff said, this is a 14 megawatt DC project. It's a 10 megawatt AC project. So you see up top, it says 10 megawatt. It's not that I don't know what the size is, it's that there's a D rate there. When you transform DC, the direct current power, into AC, the alternating current, there's a D rate that goes on. So it's the same size, it's just an AC versus a DC sizing. So we're talking about upwards of 2,200 homes. That's how much power this thing's going to give us. So that's pretty good. As I mentioned, the customer is IREA. It's not going to be a community solar. We have one customer, and that's directly to the utility. And our term, our minimum, our agreement is 20 years, but we have options to extend up to 40 years. And we talked about life of the system itself, and everything's expected to be upwards of 40 years. So it's a long-term contract that we have both with the landowner and with the utility. This is our layout currently. So you can see we've got Brick Center Road and County Road 6. As you go in County Road 6, as you're heading east on County Road 6, our access will be at the southeast corner of the project. So currently that area is being grazed, which is great. And when when we are ready for construction, that we'll work with the landowner and the rancher there. Our layout is, as Jeff mentioned, we've got our equipment pads in there, pretty central located, certainly not on the edges. So those big transformers and inverters are going to be away from any kind of area that a public right-of-way, for example.
I have a question.
You bet.
This Sixth Avenue, kind of the Sixth. Is it paved?
No, so it's paved at west of Brick Center. It's paved, but east of Brick Center, it's not.
Are you going to improve that?
So our current language in our leases that are in our agreement is that we will bring the road back to, it's in our application, bring the road back to its pre-existing condition. So right now it is graded. It's dirt, gravel. But yeah, right now our proposal is that we'll make sure to bring the road back to its pre-existing condition, which is not paved.
Thank you.
You bet. So these are some pictures of what the single-axis tracker would look like. So you've got a few different views of it. And then I'll talk a little bit, get back to the mic, talk a little bit about the local benefits, both the community benefits and the economic benefits. So one of the and please do stop me if there's any questions at all. One of the nice things about these facilities is that they do allow us to maintain large tracts of land, then they can be redeveloped or used for their original purpose later after the life of the project. So that's nice. It also allows the landowner to provide some additional income to get some lease payments on that land. It helps IREA to fulfill their renewable portfolio standard, their portion of the renewable energy standard. And it does bring an increased tax revenue to Arapahoe County. So that helps. Some of the economic data on this is our total local jobs. So local jobs during construction versus after construction. So we have 22 local full-time jobs during construction, 130 across the full total project. And our construction period is about 12 to 16 weeks. So yep. We want to, as much local labor as we can get, absolutely. Things like fencing, building the access road, and if we have to do any site prep, we want to get that as local as possible. Some things that require, electrician's license or certain certifications or something like that, we may need to go to companies in Denver. We're going to be the, for lack of a better term, the GC of the project, and then we may need to sub out an electrician or sub out certified solar installers from Denver. And as I'm sure you've seen on some of our handouts, of course, the whole Front Range area has a lot of different very well qualified solar installation labor out there. But yeah, for anything like fencing, landscaping, we'd love to get as local as possible.
Our unemployment rate's the lowest of any major city in the country.
Well, let's try to fix that. at least for a 3-month period.
Yeah, if you have to go to that.
No, we don't plan on that.
As a general contractor, will you give preference to Colorado-located contractors?
Certainly, and as Jeff talked about our financial models, everything we model is labor rates for that area. So if we're building in Dallas, we're going to model labor rates for Dallas. So yeah, our goal is to get financially and as a part of our values of our business, we're going to be trying to hire as much local as we can.
Okay, I'm talking about local companies, not local labor. There's if you hire a grading contractor,
right?
Put out a request for bid. Is one of your things you're going to look at and give preference to is a contractor who's located in Denver?
Yeah, located down the street in Bennett if we can. Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And then we've talked about that's of course during construction, and then after we have it's constructed, we are really just doing operations and maintenance. So we make money when this thing produces. We want to make sure it's producing. We have everything. We have a remote monitoring, so we know we get an alert if anything isn't working. We have visits planned, site visits planned, inspections planned. So we have the equivalent of 1 to 2 full-time employees for O&M after construction. So we've talked a lot about Cypress Creek and how we work and why our business model is the way it is. A couple of things I wanted to come back and hit on were the community relations portion and the environmental impact, or really the siting of these things. So we work hard to make sure we select where we site. 80 acres is no small chunk. So we aren't going to just be, flip about where we want to put it. So we look very closely at what's going to have everything has an impact. And I walk on a dirt trail, I have an impact. So what can we do to reduce our impact as much as possible? And part of that community relations component is for every project we do, before we bring anything to the local jurisdiction, Arapahoe County in this case, we send letters out to all the affected neighbors and all of the adjacent property owners. We do our best to contact them. If we don't contact through mail, we try to find ways to make sure we contact everyone, say, hey, this is coming your way. Do you have concerns? Do you have questions? As Jeff mentioned, we can put the equipment pad someplace else, or we can move things around. And because we have that ability, it's nice to be able to work with the community ahead of time. So we did that in this case, and we also, of course, with Arapahoe County, when we get to this stage, the Planning Commission stage, we did this posting of the sign, as Sherman mentioned, the mailers, and made sure everything was publicly noticed as much as possible. But I think really it's getting out ahead of the game and talking with the community and understanding, where do you want this? What are your questions? What are your concerns? And what can we do to mitigate that? And with that, I'm open to questions. And we also have, so Jeff was introduced. We also have our professional engineer that stamped the plans that you have in here, is in the audience and can answer some questions as well.
Okay, I'll go again. What's the total cost? What's the total cost of that thing?
The total cost of this thing is going to be about $18 million.
18 in here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read.
It's $1.30 per megawatt.
Okay.
Yep.
So, Bennett Solar LLC, who's that? Is that town Bennett or?
Nope. So each of these, and I'm sure you've seen this with the other, you talked about some of the other 2 megawatt projects. Each of these solar farms, solar projects is going to be held by a separate LLC for a couple of reasons. Because it's a standalone entity, it doesn't go anywhere. If for any reason Cypress Creek gets run over by a pink elephant, Bennett Solar continues to exist and maintain and run and operate, so you don't have some structure in the community.
So who is it? Who's in the LLC? You guys in it?
So who's in it? So it's so Cypress Creek Renewables is a major partner. And then our financing partners, which is yet to be determined. We don't get that. Well, actually.
This is part of, so this gets into where, if I were to draw like an organizational chart of all this.
Excuse me, could you step up to the mic?
Yeah. It starts to get really complicated, but the simplest conceptual way is that Cypress Creek Renewables is the top level parent company. And we have Cypress Creek Development and then Cypress Creek Power. Power owns control over all the individual projects, which themselves are an LLC. And then also brought into the projects, we have a tax equity investor who's brought on board simply for the tax credits. So they own, 50% of the project. This is going to get into this is why financial engineers make so much.
Basically, what I was trying to figure out is there any local ownership in
the
city? That's all. The rest of that I got.
There typically is not. The most local you'll get is we get a lot of funding from banks, and banks will often have local branches. Yeah. But in terms of the corporate location, it's very rare to have them be next to the project as well.
So the property owner, does he lease this property to you for a period of time?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Is it a lease? Is that the?
Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll buy the property, but most of the time it's a lease.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Rader?
No, sir.
It's good to have one that you can always count on,
I can.
Can you explain what the privacy slats are going to be made from, and is that going to go around the whole perimeter, cover the whole fence, or will there be a gap
So,
in the slats?
yep, and we don't have a quote from a fencing company on the specific materials or anything like that, and I do know, in this area things get beaten up by the sun and those kind of things. If it's going to be wood, that's going to get, beat up by the sun and the rain and the weather, and so I certainly, once we talk to a fencing company, we get an idea of what that material is. All of that goes into our operations and maintenance plan. So those things, anything on site as it starts to deteriorate. For example, we have our application in with Bennett Fire Protection District, and we have a vegetation management plan signed off by them. And that's part of our operations and maintenance. We have to make sure that we, on one hand we can say, it's great, we build it, turn it on, and we don't have to be there anymore. On the other hand, yes, we do, because we have agreements to uphold. We don't want grasses or weeds or any vegetation growing that, and I don't know that it would on this site, but for example, growing up and then shading the panels, because of course any shading is going to reduce our production. So all of these things are in our best interest as well. Right now, the privacy slats are to be on anything visible from the public right-of-way, the Brick Center in Mitchell. But yeah, if that's something that you need to know the specific materials, I can certainly get back to you on talking to a fencing company. Yeah, I think that's going to be important.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I do.
No, you're done.
No, not for her.
You had your
This is for staff.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
You can ask.
Okay.
Your allotment.
If I remember correctly, Arapahoe County has some kind of agreement with developers to fix or enhance the roads that are border the properties they're developing. Is that right? Okay.
I'm Spencer Smith with Engineering Services. From what I understand with oil and gas projects, we do a similar agreement as we'll do on this one to go out with inspectors and evaluate the condition of the road before they start. And the agreement is basically to return the road to that condition when they're done. So from what I understand, this will follow a similar format as that.
So why aren't we requiring them to improve the road to 2-lane paved? Because I think we do that on developers now. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, you do. Typically, the fire department will drive that. So I'm curious. I didn't see Bennett Fire saying anything, but I know Cunningham and others do this. They'll require you to put in road-based, well, now typically pavement of some kind, asphalt, concrete, to support a 75,000-pound vehicle. So,
correct. On these similar projects that we've done, the internal, once they access the roadway and their access goes internal to their site, they do have to meet approval by the fire district as to, the width of the access road, the paving section. In this case, though, the traffic generated, there's a little bit during construction, and that's the big part of why we do these agreements, because that can impact the roadway, that's gravel. But once they're done, generally they're going to have, a pickup truck or two a month or something. And so there's really no long-term traffic generation to necessitate building out additional laneage or paving with asphalt or things like that. So,
yeah, I thought that our whole idea to get 6th Avenue continued all the way, properly continued, all the way to Byers, is to have these sections done so that the county only has to put the other sections in. We don't have to pave the whole thing.
Right, because at his point,
there is a
5 years or 8 years when there's a lot of traffic moving through here. Arapahoe County is just going to build the road and pay for it.
I mean, that's what
you're
generally
with, right?
Right. Generally, what we're doing on these types of projects, because it's a little bit different because it is also a lease. we are getting the right of way so that the county has that ultimate right of way along the frontage. So that is in place and that doesn't have to be purchased in the future or obtained, that could slow up a project or cause problems. But
we will pay to build the road. Yes, we will. That's because there won't be homes paying to build the road.
Right, and the difference would be, say, if after their lease is over and the owner develops the property into something, residential, commercial site that would be generating regular traffic, then it would follow kind of the standard practices at that point that they would then have to build their frontage improvements.
Probably not going to wait 20 years to do 40 to, well, but 20 is the minimum. Okay. Probably not going to wait 20 years to build these roads.
6th Avenue especially. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is.
Basically, the answer is yes. Arapahoe County is going to get stuck with the bill.
Potentially, hard to say, I guess, right now.
The landowner's going to get stuck. I'd look at that lease. I'd look at the lease.
But yes, that is the strategy we've had on these similar types of projects thus far, is to not require the build out of the roadway.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good question. Any others? If not, we'll go to the public hearing. And we do have people signed up to speak. We have some that are signed up, like the Van Dykes are signed up in favor of the project and do not want to speak. I'm going to go down the list. If you changed your mind and you do want to speak, by all means, just wave and let me know. Christine Von, sorry. Okay. Jeffrey Weber would like to speak. Oh, you already did. You've had your turn. Jared Hicks.
Also the applicant.
Okay. Good, you guys are in favor of it. Michelle Zimmerman. Okay. Graham Boswell. Okay. Katie Byers. Okay. That's everybody. Is there anyone else who would like to address the Planning Commission? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Mr. Fair, do you have any other comments? Okay. So now this is back to us. We have someone who'd like to move forward. This motion.
Make a motion?
Ms. Bethel.
Yes. In the case of U17-001, Bennett Solar Use by Special Review, I've read the staff report and received testimony at the public hearing. I agree with staff findings for the application, including all plans and attachments as set forth in the staff report. I hereby move to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners approve, subject to the following conditions 1 through 6 as outlined in the staff report.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Rader seconds. Do we have any further discussion? I just want to make the comments I always do when we have solar projects. I think they're great, and I think it's wonderful to get to do this, and I'm glad in the future that we're a part of it. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Gosh. So now, Mr. Fair, are you going to fade back away? We've asked about that before. 2 megawatts instead.
It's pretty challenging, and we have these subsurface right things where I can put the pad, right on the street, so I can drive right down the neighborhood. Like it's kind of a stark contrast, really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's stuffy in here tonight. Really stuffy. If they turn the air off. Actually, I was thinking about, since it's going to be showing them, I go behind them and try to do that whole start with this one. Yes. Yes, we are. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if all of you were able to print out the map.
They sent it to us.
Anybody else?
Oh.
Last time we brought our giant stack of stuff, we got to recycle it.
I know. We're always bringing our cycle stuff so you can recycle it.
Oh, we got to recycle them at the end of the meeting last week.
Shut those
But I'm
off.
good, I don't have to carry it home.
Jan, I think if we could have a quick discussion, I think there is concern about this issue with the roads, and that we think that message needs to be carried to the commissioners that, if you're building,
Put in the road.
yeah, put in the roads to the.
That's fine. We did use our engineer.
Right, I saw he was sweating.
Well,